Hey everybody, it's me again. We're going to talk a little bit about the Antebellum South. Now, Antebellum means before the Civil War. Now, again, we have to thank our friend, Ms. Susan Pohar from Horace Greeley High School in Chappaqua, New York, for creating this lovely PowerPoint for us. Again, she's does this on PowerPointPalooza.net or PPTPalooza.net. So again, you guys want to review stuff, you can go right there. But the Antebellum South again is a Southern society before the American Civil War. We've talked about this before earlier, so we're going to go through this rather quickly. Again, you can see that early emancipation in the South. That means the freeing of slaves in the North. Okay, and you can see by the dates, Massachusetts is in 1870. Or 1780, I'm sorry, and New York was 1799, and again, all the way to the west, and Louisiana Purchase is 1803. But again, in the southern states still remain slave states. Okay, the Missouri Compromise, when we talked about this a few times, again, it's an attempt to limit their movement or the spread of slavery. Okay, and you can see that Missouri was the northernmost slave state. And that was in 1821. And the territory to the north and west of Missouri, again, is unorganized territory, but is also going to be slave-free. If you look to the west, you see Spain and Oregon, and how we're going to move slowly west. Okay, Antebellum Southern Society. Again, this is pre-Civil War Southern Society. Okay, characteristics of the pre-Civil War South were primarily agrarian. That means they were farmers. Okay, an economic power is going to shift from the upper north to the lower south, which is this upper north or upper south is states like Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina, and this lower south is places like Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, Florida, Texas, and South Carolina. Okay, so you're going to see the shift from tobacco to cotton during this time period. Again, the phrase cotton is king. By 1860, we were producing 5 million bales of cotton a year, about over 57% of the total U.S. exports. That means cotton made up more exports than anything else combined. Okay, they weren't very industrialized. Again, the first industries in there are going to be the cotton gins and the cotton factories. Okay, and they had again rudimentary financial system. They didn't have a lot of banks, and so they relied on really much a lot of barter and a lot of trade. The only real currency was used to buy slaves. Okay, and they had inadequate transportation system. No railroads, no real canals. Everything relied on wagons and riverboats. Okay. It was a slaveocracy with the slave owners on the top, followed by just white yeoman farmers, the plain folk. These are the non-slave owning white people in the South, about 6 million of them. Okay, then you had free blacks, which was about 250,000. These are former slaves who lived in the South. Okay, and you had the slaves, 3.2 million slaves. Okay, total population of the U.S. is 23 million. And 40% of those lived in the South, with again over 3 million of them being slaves. There you can see the slave population of the South. Okay, again, whites made up most states were dominated by whites, but if you look at states like Mississippi and South Carolina, you're going to see huge percentages. Actually, more people in those states were slave than free. The Southern economy, again, pre-Civil War or antebellum Southern economy. There's this first textile mill founded in 1845. Okay, again, they were trying to industrialize it. It wasn't a very successful attempt. You can see the agriculture in the South. You had cotton, corn, tobacco, and so again, there's a lot of stuff going on in the South. Okay, slaves picking cotton in the Mississippi plantation. You can see that a large number of African Americans, slaves out there picking cotton. Okay, using the cotton gin. Again, remember the cotton gin was invented by Eli Whitney, and because of the cotton gin, it made slavery a hugely profitable and cotton a hugely profitable enterprise in the South. Changes in cotton production. You can see that cotton production in 1820 wasn't very big. By 1860, you can see that cotton is king. In fact, king, it takes over, dominates much of the deep South and even into states like Virginia and North Carolina. Okay, value of cotton exports as a percentage of all U.S. exports. You can see in 1800 it was very little, and by 1860, 57.5% of the total exports, that means everything, was going to be cotton. Okay. Then you have hauling a week's cotton. Okay, this is a picture by William Henry Brown. Okay, slaves moving cotton heading for the gin. Okay, this is another occupation in the South. This is boiling sugar. Okay, sugar cane was huge in states like Louisiana and Florida and parts of Georgia. Okay. Slavery is often referred to as the South's peculiar institution. Okay, it's unique. Peculiar generally means unique or odd or strange. Okay, but it was the South's unique quality. Quality is probably a bad word, but it's what they used, how they referred to it as. And you can see a slave notice, a slave auction. Again, it's selling off the slaves. Okay, these are ways they kind of kept slaves in check. As you can see, the slave muzzle with a steel collar around the neck, and then there's branding. Okay, slaves were actually branded by their owners, so they could identify them if they ever ran away. Okay, and you can see there's a picture of a slave branding. You got some slave shoes and leg irons and a tag. Okay, and then you can see as slave labor changes, it's again 55% of all slaves were used in the cotton industry. 15% were in house slaves, and you had rice, sugar, and hemp slaves, tobacco farms, and again mining, lumber industry, and construction. Okay, but again, a large percentage of slaves were used in the harvesting and the production of cotton. What's life like on a southern plantation? Slave owning population of 1850. 64% of whites living in the South were non-slave owners. 18% owned 5 or fewer. 15% owned 5 to 50 slaves, and again, a very small percentage, about 2.5% of the population of the South, actually owned more than 50 slaves. Okay, there's a slave quarters. By the way, all those people lived inside that small shack. It's probably the size of a shed by what we consider today. This is the Hollywood version of the South. Okay, a real Georgia plantation. Okay, you can see how it's divided up. You see your legend over there on the right. Cotton takes up a large percentage. You have rice, you have sugar cane and corn, okay, potatoes, peas, and other crops being grazed on this plantation. And again, to the far left of the picture, you can see the pasture for all the animals, along with the slave quarters, the main house, and other outbuildings. Again, here's your Hollywood version of slavery, and a house slave and the mistress of the house. And you see a real slave and her charge, or the child she's responsible for raising. Okay, and again, you see Southern society. You notice there's not a lot of slaves in the picture. There's really just 2. Okay, and it's a lovely little group. And again, but this is the Hollywood version of of Southern society. Here's a slave family, and you can see that they actually give the dog a chair. And so this is probably 4 generations of a family, and it's a unique group. Okay, here's a slave owner's ledger, how he kept track of his slaves and what he did with them, when he bought them, he sold them, what they did. Okay, laws regarding slavery, the 3/5 Compromise we talked about, fugitive slave clause in the Constitution, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793, and then the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which we've talked about a couple times. Okay, first anti-slavery society was created in Philadelphia by Benjamin Franklin. Slavery was eliminated in all northern states by 1804. The termination of slave trade from Africa going to be enforced by the British Royal Navy. Newly independent republics of Central and South America declared slaves free. Slavery is going to be abolished throughout the British Empire by 1830. Slavery is going to be abolished in French colonies by 1844. and serfs, or the enslaved peasants of Russia, are going to be emancipated in 1861. So you can see that slavery in this country was an aberration, was an oddity. People didn't like slavery. Most people in our country really didn't like slavery, but again, because it was such a huge part of the southern economy and the southern labor force, that they really couldn't do away with it. Okay. Okay. Again, slaves were expensive. Okay. Again, the goal was to raise the exit cost of keeping slaves, and you know, what slavery was going to be like. Okay, slave patrols, keeping slaves. You know, these are groups that roamed the countryside trying to catch runaway slaves and interfere with the Underground Railroad. Black codes. This is the laws that were used to enforce strict controls on all slaves, or all blacks, including free blacks in the South. And again, if a slave ran away, they tended to cut off a foot or a toe, if it happened more than once. Okay. Slave resistance. We talked about these before. Sambo is a pattern of behavior used as a charade in front of whites, the innocent laughing black character, bulging eyes, thick lips. Okay, you can see here that's an example of a caricature of a slave. Okay, and this is a 20th century version. Okay, probably created about 1920, 1930. Okay, depicting again, African American in this country. Slave resistance, refusal to work hard, isolated acts of sabotage. These are all things we've talked about before. Okay, and again, the Underground Railroad. Ads for slaves. Again, this is secret messages on how to get north. Okay, slave rebellions throughout the Americas. Okay, again, we talked about Gabriel Prosser and Denmark Vesey. We've seen those videos on them before. So again, these are all ideas of slave revolts. Okay, Nat Turner, again. We could talk about our cultural slavery, black Christianity. Again, these are all things we've talked about. This is a quick review for you. So again, you can stop and look at these and take notes. But most of the stuff we've already had notes on. Again, the Pidgin or Gullah languages. Nuclear family, again, was extended to be larger than just mom, dad, and the kids. Music was very important because, again, it was how the slaves would pass their time and communicate and send messages. Okay. Again, here's propaganda, how slaves were better off as slaves versus living freely in their own country. Okay. Well, that was our quick run through of this antebellum South. Again, we've talked about this. We've taken notes on it before. So if you have any questions, again, just go back and review all this, and we can get everything done the right way. And again, I'll post more as we go. So if you have any questions, again, just feel free to let me know. Post on Edmodo or stop me in school. Have a good day, everybody, and we'll see you soon.